And we're live. How's it going,
Hey,
everyone?
how's
Hey,
everyone?
finally. Yeah, sorry for the delay here, but I hope everyone's had time to grab their coffee, stretch their legs, and also has had time to maybe look at what I'm sharing right now, which is the kind of program or at least the plan for today. So Sam and I have chatted about doing this for a while now,
Hmm.
and finally we're doing it. Pretty much, Sam's been working on this project, and I'm particularly interested in sharing or having him share with you guys like what he's been working on, particularly because he's touching on some super important concepts, namely governance. That's like a big one. So it's all about governance, really at the center of what he's been developing. And also the second part is the user interface. So many projects out there are really just focusing on palette development.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that this seminar will go through sort of what Sam's been learning, him and his team, on kind of really developing with user experience in mind. So for those of you who haven't checked out this new repository that I set up, please do, because it's the perfect place for you to post like your ideas for coming on seminar. And at the same time, you can also in advance check what is going to come on seminar before we actually go live. So that means, you can prepare your questions beforehand and maybe even interact with while we're discussing what issue, what topic we want to talk about. You can like go here and post ideas or maybe ask more questions. And so I'm really hoping that we can use this repository to enable these kinds of engagements. Anyhow, with that being said, how's it going, Sam?
Hello. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I'm so excited about sharing what we've been working on, and I'm really just excited about like talking about Web3 and Substrate. And I try and get on Spaces as much as I can on Twitter, just to raise awareness of just the Polkadot ecosystem and the potential. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Sam, you've been around for a while, at least developing with
Yeah.
Substrate. Do you wanna just kick things off with, what your story, like your
Yeah.
developer journey so far, and yeah, what you've been up to?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sam Elamin, everyone. Nice to meet you. I've been working with tech. I've been writing code for about 15 years now. Started off as a data engineer. I've worked at various other places like large corporations like Sony PlayStation, Just Eat, Discovery Channel, building distributed systems. But for the past year and a bit, about 18 months now, been mostly focused on Web3. So I started my journey into Web3 by trying to find, projects in the space that deal with data. And that's kind of what led me to Kylan, because I was like, I'm new to Web3. I don't know what it's like building, but I'm an experienced engineer. So I'm going to find a domain that I'm really comfortable in, one where I know the problems, so I can transition into Web3, an easier transition than just going to jump into DeFi, right? So yeah.
Right.
So
So to quickly tell us like what Colin is doing and was doing at the time when
yeah,
you were helping them,
yeah.
and yeah, what was your role there?
Yeah. So
Uh,
I joined Kylan, I think, end of April last year, and my role was just to grow the team to be like the midpoint between someone who could speak to the community and someone who can translate the request of the community to the team. That slowly transitioned into grow. I grew into the role, and I went to become the team lead, and then eventually being CTO/CEO, running the show basically. So around November last year, I realized I was not spending any time with the family at all. So I decided to take a break and try and focus on family for a bit. But throughout my year, my biggest frustration has been the lack of accountability. So many projects launch with so many promises, like so many promises,
mhm.
or promising the world but never get to deliver, and people tend to get dumped on. I was like, well, let's build accountability. We've got the blockchain. We've got a way to verify trustlessly. Why are we not applying that to the promises, right? And that's kind of what led me to Imbue. And I decided to build it, with product first, with no investors. We actually build something that works end to end, because that's the only way we can protect the community completely, by taking the risk completely as the team building it.
Mhm,
There's
mhm.
no risk of people getting dumped on, and also if the community doesn't find value in it, they never get to risk their funds, right? So I just feel like that's a unique way of building something, but it's only unique in Web3. That's how Web2 was built for a very long time.
Yeah, like putting yourself out there, building something that
Yeah.
you at least think or have done some research that people will be interested in doing, and then the value of what you're building is really, it is basically deemed by the community. The
Yeah,
community
it's
around it
self-invested.
will
Exactly.
be a testament to how valuable that thing is, right?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
if I'm not mistaken, you've actually applied for a Web3 grant to do like the
Yeah.
first kind of iterations of the project, and now you're really going into like these next milestones. Maybe you
Yeah.
want to talk about how that's been going and where
Yes.
you're at currently before we talk about really what
Yeah.
Imbue.network is.
So we applied for the grant back in October, right? We got it fairly quickly. We got it within, I think, a week, less than 2 weeks. And the Web3
Cool.
Foundation goes through a tremendous amount of due diligence when it comes to the team, their expertise, their credibility, their ability to execute. But they saw the need on what we're building. They saw the potential of actually bringing real utility and helping impacting people's lives, and also solving the funding problem that we have in the ecosystem. Funding with accountability is what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the grant fairly quickly, but we weren't allowed. We weren't really allowed to basically share that information until we delivered the very first milestone. So it's made out of 2 milestones. Our grant, the first being, can people create projects on the chain, and the UI behind that? And milestone 2 is, once they create a project, can they get funded? Can people vote on the progress? Can they submit milestones, and then people who funded them vote on the progress, and so on and so forth? So all the functionality. Now, when we
Mm-hmm.
completed milestone 1 back at the about the end of January, so about 6 weeks ago, we finished the full flow, like the blockchain part, all the functionality that's required to fund the project, contribute, vote, and with partial withdrawals based on the milestones that you've defined. That's done, right? So we submitted to the
Mm-hmm.
to the Web3 Foundation. They evaluated the code, made sure that what we promised we actually delivered on, right?
So wait. Before we get into like the detailed sort of what specifically you've been delivering as part of these Web3 grant milestones,
Mhm.
the first thing I wanted to ask you is, can you send a link or post a link in the chat on where we can find like these milestones? Because I think one of the things you and I talked about, like sort of outside this conversation right now, is how important it is to you to get the community involved with at least adding transparency to the decisions you are making as a
Absolutely.
developer team on this project.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm going to post on the link is the link to
Cool.
the grant itself. I can even post a link to the discussion with the Web3 Foundation, right?
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, because initially, there were some members that said, this seems really interesting, but we're not quite sure if it'll add value. And then when we went into detail as to why it adds value, they were supportive of it. But we were going to build it with or without funding, right? So because it is something we really believed is absolutely required in this space. So I'm just trying to find the pull request. Yeah, I did find it. So I'm just
I'll add that link to this doc so that people can see it after, for sure. So let's get started here with, okay, we kind of covered like, who you are, like in terms of your journey and leading
Sam.
you to wanting to build this thing. You're Sam. By the way, guys, I'm Sasha. I work for Parachain Technologies. Haven't said that. I usually start with the whole like,
intro.
This is Substrate Seminar, but here we are. This is not my first Substrate Seminar, and I'm sure the people that are here know me already. So let's get into things. Let's really get into what is Imbue.network. What are you thinking from the design perspective of how you envision users using this
Absolutely.
platform?
So
let's talk about that. Like, so what is Imbue?
So, all right. So, Imbue, to explain what Imbue is, I have to explain why I'm building it, right? Imbue is a crowdfunding blockchain on Polkadot. But why is the most important thing. I think when people talk about building on Web3, they need to answer the why. And to me, my biggest frustration with Web3 coming into it was the lack of utility. I don't understand how it can help people who don't live in the West, particularly like someone who, where you're born, and it's a lottery. The lottery of where you're born defines your opportunities and your chances of success. That's just a fact, right? So someone who's born in Africa or Southeast Asia or Latin America have very different opportunities than someone who lives in the West. So I wanted to acknowledge that, and that's what brought me to Web3. And I wanted to build something to help people who have no opportunities or lack the opportunities where they are. They have all the resources to succeed, except funding, right? So what I wanted to do was build out a crowdfunding blockchain to allow people to submit ideas, submit requests for funding, something they can convince people, look, I've got a project here that can really succeed, but I don't have the funding for it. And they're able to define their project, define their milestones. I'm going to do A, B, and C, and then define how much of the total funding they need based on milestones. That way they can get funding from people who believe in them the most. And then those funds are safe until they convince their funders, their contributors, I've actually done work. So that's where democracy comes in.
Totally. So it's really like it's funny that you're getting support from the Web3 Foundation, who is a very similar sort of entity enabling projects to like get funding. However, it's very much centralized around the Web3 Foundation and their decision makers. It seems to me that what you envision is sort of a platform where any project can get funded in a way that doesn't depend on a centralized group of people that are backing that project.
Exactly. That's essentially what Web3 is to me anyway. It's open, censorship resistant, and open for everyone. So why can't we? So if someone tells me, oh, what's the utility of this blockchain, right? Or what's the point of all this Web3 crap? And I can be like, look, this helps someone achieve their dream where they are, they just don't have the opportunity. They can't go to the bank and say, look, give me 100,000, right? They don't know the right people. They don't know the right connections. Why don't we utilize Web3 to get funding from people who believe in them the most?
Yeah, super cool. So I want to suggest that we jump right into what you've actually built so far. So I think proudly, like, let's stress that like you've just finished doing the MVP, right? Yes. You literally are fresh from the rink. The boxing ring, right? Where you're done this first round of completing these first milestones. You've gone through some pain points. You probably have a lot of learnings that you want to share like in your journey. So I'm really interested in hearing about those things. So either I can go through the code base while my screen shares. Absolutely. Or maybe it's better that you share it. Why don't you share the pallet code and we'll go through that?
Absolutely.
So I'll stop sharing my screen. And while we do that, I want to first of all, I need to stop sharing my screen. Okay, here we go. There we go, closer. So if you hover over your video, you'll see a share icon, and you'll be able to do that. Right. So while we set this things up, guys, like I really want to go over how this is a great learning opportunity, like because Sam's created this palette. There's a bunch of dispatchables that he's done, again, tightly mapped to how he envisions the users interacting with this. Also bearing in mind that he's not gonna build this entire thing in one go, right? So there's a lot of things that he's thinking about. And so I'm hoping that we can check that out. Do you want to zoom in on your screen a bit? The last thing before I give you the complete mic here is, guys, ask questions. Like, we're here to chat, we're here to hang out. Like, please interrupt, raise your hand, say something in the chat. I'll be looking at the chat and the questions while Sam goes over this palette. So take it away, Sam.
Right. So I was going to go through the code in my local machine, but I think it really helps if you go through GitHub, right? So something really cool I use with the team, we use in our team, is instead of going to GitHub, we go to GitHub 1S, right? And that's like basically VS Code on the browser. It allows me to look through the entire code base very, very easily, right? So this is the code base for the UI, right? I wanted to show you that so you know it's there, but we're going to start as Sasha said with the pallet, right? So this is, again, I'm just going to a different repository, and this is where our pallet code lives, right? So one thing I try and tell people when looking at new code bases, someone said, stop explaining things well if you want questions. Well, that's a good point. But yeah, something I tell people coming into new code bases, and this is just general development knowledge, is if there are tests, it's a much easier way of explaining how something works. So that's why we have tests, which describe, what are the main behaviors of this piece of thing you're looking at, right? So we can go through the palettes and over a high level, but I wanted to go through these tests because it gives you an idea of what is possible and what isn't possible, right? I'm just trying to lower all these tests are methods to give you a full idea of, what's possible and what isn't. So going through them in a high level is like that you can create a project, but if you create a project with less than 100% of the milestones.
Do you want to zoom in a tiny bit more, Sam?
Yeah.
I think it'll, yeah.
Oh,
not the only one.
Maybe if I do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Cool. So yeah, so this is example of a test that says, if you create a project with less than 100% milestones, you should get this error. Milestone to percentage is not 100, right? So all your milestones should equate to 100. What happens if you create a project with no name, project with no data or description, the scheduling of the round, right? So when you create a project, because we're so early, we have points where the council comes in. The council is made out of 7 people, 4 from the core team members and 3 from the community. And the role of the council is really to be that safety net, to define what success is until we have a way of handing over the power to everyone. The problem with just handing over all the rules, the admin rules to everyone, is because if you don't have the structures in place to protect people, you get into situations where you're getting exploited, as you saw with a few DAOs on the network, where someone who has a lot of funds of that particular token will say, I'm raising a proposal to mint 1 or 10 million new tokens to myself. And if no one knows about that proposal, they don't vote against it, and then suddenly it goes through and your system got hacked. So that's why we have a role of the council to come in, just to put in the protections in place. So in the event I was talking about, we can say any action that has to do with minting has to go with 80 or 90% approval from the entire network. Otherwise, it doesn't pass, right? So these are things that we want to work with the community to define what success looks like. So yeah, so you create a project. The project gets approved for funding. The council goes through what the Web3 Foundation really does. Like, look at the project, the team. Do they have the expertise to build it out or not? And then they schedule the round, and people can start contributing, right? Once they contribute, that's what the last point where the council comes in and say, okay, are we happy with this level of contribution? Because what happens if you receive 70% of your funding, not the full target, right? Is it an all or nothing approach, or is it like okay, you got 80%, we're still going to let you through? Or what happens if you get 120%, right? So these are, again, things that we want to work with the community, but they're configuration issues rather than technical problems. So once a project gets approved, finally, we're able to start withdrawing funds, right? We vote on milestones after a project submits some milestone, as in I've done some work, so I'm going to submit my milestone. Hey, I've done the first milestone, which is worth, I don't know, X amount of percent. Let my contributors know. They get to vote on the progress, and then the withdrawing. Like, so if I get, if I was able to submit my first milestone, which was worth 20%, and it got approved, I need to be able to withdraw 20% of the funding, right? So we go through tests to make sure, only the person who raised the funding or the request to funding can withdraw, no one else. And yeah, so these are kind of like the overall tests. Now, to jump into the code, now that you've gone through the test, we also have the code structured in a way where it goes through the steps that you need, right? For example, this is step 1, which is create the project, right? Step 2 is the role here is the initiator, someone who wants funds. Step 2 is the admin. Again, describing what I just described in testing. The admin gets to schedule the round, saying, okay, we think this project is useful. So the contribution, this is done by someone who wants to fund the project, a contributor, that's the role. And then once the project gets contributed to, the admin comes in and says, okay, did they match their contribution? Then yes, fine. And this again can be removed once we have the thresholds done. So that's project been funded. Now someone's done some work. The initiator submits their milestones, right? And then once they submit milestones, the people who funded them, and only the people who funded them, get to vote because they're the ones with money at risk. They vote on that particular milestone. Here is finalized milestone voting. That is done by the initiator, because when you submit a milestone, it opens up a voting round. So let you say you have 2 weeks for people to vote on your progress. What happens if you get all the votes that are required within the first 3 days? You probably don't want to wait 2 weeks. Now, we could get the council coming here to approve it, but we gave the power over to the initiator to say, look, if everyone who funded you has voted, you can finalize the round early, right? And what's really cool is here, see, we have a check that says the number of votes is equal to the number of contribution, the total number of contribution. Otherwise, milestone voting is not complete. You can't complete finalize the entire voting round if not everyone who has funded you has voted, right? So that's finalized. That's kind of like a little helper method that we're using to simplify the process. And then the withdrawal again. So what we do here is we look at the milestones that have been approved, and we basically unlock a portion of the funds, and we're saying, how many funds you have available is equal to the number of funds that you have unlocked minus how much you've already withdrawn. And then that's it. We say the projects have, we raise a event to say, the project's been withdrawn. That's Imbue from a very high level of what we have built so far.
Can you go in a little bit about what's going on in terms of the kind of governance primitives that really sort of make this usable from like a more decentralized perspective, and maybe talk about how you want to improve there?
Yes.
And yeah.
So from that governance perspective, the thing that are decentralized now, the decisions that are decentralized are the submission of the milestone. Anyone can submit a milestone. The creation of the project. Anyone can create a project. But the governance element to say yes or no, that's in the voting of the milestones and the submission of the milestones. That's the element that's been built so far. You, Sasha, you asked for 100,000. You said milestone 1 was 10%. I'm going to submit my milestone. That opens up the voting round for everyone who has contributed to. So if I'm a whale, let's say I'm a whale and I've got 1 million Imbue tokens, but I've only funded you 10, right? I don't have more than 10's worth of say. Like my vote is proportional to how much money I put in.
Right.
So if you don't have a lot of money at risk, you don't get a lot of say in the progress. That's what we've built. The governance element at the moment.
It's kind of like a flavor of conviction voting, right?
Yes, but the slight difference is if you don't have money at risk, then you can't vote at all. So with conviction, it could be, we want to build conviction into it. So decisions around the network itself, shall we implement this particular stable currency as an example? Then you can vote with conviction. That way, I want to vote with conviction and lock my rounds for X amount longer than someone who has less, right? That's essentially how conviction would work. You want to lock more to give yourself more voting power. But over here, you fund more to get more of a say on the progress, and which is fine, right? You have money at risk, so you should have a say, a bigger say if you have. But what's important, and which is what we have not built yet, is the vote of no confidence. So what happens if you, Sasha, you are building a shoe shop, right? You're selling shoes, you're selling flowers. It doesn't matter what you're selling, but the point is you ask for X amount of money. You ask for 100,000 and you finish milestone 1. Everyone's happy with your progress, right? You submitted your proof and people voted you through. So now you took 10%, right? But 90% is locked. And then your shop has to shut down because of COVID, right? And basically the project's failed. You can't succeed at all because someone else took over your lease or something along those lines. Now people who funded you can raise a vote of no confidence. It doesn't matter how much I funded you. I can give you 1 or I can give you 100,000. It doesn't matter. As long as I have given you money, I have a voice and I have a say and say, look, I don't think Sasha's going to succeed. So I raise a vote of no confidence. And then that opens up a vote just like every other vote on milestones, and to say, I think Sasha's project's going to fail. Let's get the majority of the 90% of funds that are locked. Let's get them to be returned to the contributors. So that's another element of governance that we want to add. Another thing we want to add, which is the approval. Like, instead of once we define a threshold and say, look, if 60 or 70% of the people vote, then take the vote as read. Like, you don't need a council member to come in to approve the voting. If you didn't get 70%, those funds remain locked, right? And things like approval. Why should the council keep looking into projects and curating them? That's okay to start off with, but that's a bottleneck. Or even centralized, right? What happens if the network wants a project to succeed or get funded, but the council doesn't want them, right? So we need to remove that censorship from the equation, and we use that by allowing people to vote, right? And say, look, these are the new projects coming in. The council won't have a say. You just vote for the ones that you want to get funded, right? And that is basically, so there'll be a round, and then people will vote. It's like a crowd loan now. People are contributing and locking their KSM and DOT to say, we like this parachain and want to see it succeed. The same with voting a project in for scheduling them to get funded.
Yeah, completely. So there's a question that comes to mind, and the question is, just as I said that, actually, somebody asked the question. We'll get to your question in a sec. But the question that I'm wondering is, do you envision having a special committee or some sort of governance entity that can vote, who are maybe experts in that field? So for instance, if I'm building my shoe shop and one of the milestones is get the carpentry like spot on, I'd rather have someone vote on my behalf that's an expert in carpentry than me just blindly voting and saying that the milestone is approved.
Absolutely. And that's another thing, which is kind of ironically, the answer to your question is the answer to this person's question. Arkan, because what you're talking about is delegation, right? Delegating the voting. So the council says, look, we're building this shop and we found this carpenter or this audit firm, right? And they're going to vote. So what we need to do is, all the contributors, please delegate your voting power to this firm who are the expert, the subject matter expert, right? And then they vote, right? So this is absolutely something we want to build. Delegation of voting, not only on projects, milestones, but in the network itself. We need that functionality. And that also answers your question, Arkan, is yes, you can deploy this functionality.
So maybe repeat the question, because some people won't be able to see this.
So I apologize. So the question was, can this be built with just smart contracts or deploying pallets into existing parachain? Is there a considerable advantage of building your own parachain for the given use case? So really, essentially, is, can't you just build it cheaper by not building your own parachain and building on top of something else, right? It's a fair question. It's a very good question. But when you build on top of another parachain, you're limited by the infrastructure it gives you, right? So, for example, if that parachain doesn't give you the power to delegate votes, you can't delegate votes. If you want to implement multiple currencies, you're limited by what currencies your underlying parachain can implement. So it is possible, but you're just much more limited to what you can do.
I'd want to add also that you're dependent on their underlying governance too at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Right. And whether that's like a pallet on a parachain or a smart contract, your smart contract is executing in some execution environment that is governed by its own set of rules. Here, what Sam is describing is it's complete independent chain that has, by design, some governance primitives that make it what it is and define.
We define it, not the underlying platform saying, nope, you can't do this because of XYZ. So You can, I just want to stress, you can do that. You can do a lot of what we're doing so far with this MVP on a chain, but it's going to be extremely difficult to build out what we want to build out when it comes to delegation, multiple currencies. And one last thing I wanted to add about what we're building on next is the tendering, right? So I said tendering, not tindering, right? So there's a lot of Web2 projects or Web2 companies, organizations, individuals even, who want to build out something in Web3. They have a lot of ideas, but they lack the technical expertise, they lack the education, they lack the awareness, they just don't know where to start, right? And instead of currently what's happening in the Web2 world, when you're trying to get an expert to come in or a consultant, you go through all these consultancies and you go through a tendering process to say, look, we're going to look at A, B, and C, have these conversations with them and see if we can build out. And at the end of that process, which is extremely expensive, it wastes time, money, and effort. There's no guarantee you're going to get what you want. There's no guarantee you're going to get anything resembling what you want. And there's no guarantee you're going to get anything on time or at all. With Imbue, we can flip the script. We can let these Web2 companies define briefs. Like, for example, you, Sasha, you can say, look, I work at, your shoe shop. Let's say you're from Nike, right? Or Adidas. And you're saying, look, we want to build this thing in Web3. And what we're going to do is submit a brief to Imbue, and then the network itself, people can submit proposals, say, hey, Nike, my name's Sam, I'm actually a builder, and here's my portfolio, I can build this out for you, and here are my milestones. So then these Web2 companies can safely fund the proposal they find most attractive, knowing that their funds are safe until they say we're happy with the progress. So it opens up this massive new market for us, which again won't be as easily done where if we just build out a smart contract.
Yeah, completely. So another question came to mind. And the question is, okay, so we've got some sort of like governance protocol on top of the underlying protocol, which is I'll just add definitions to that. So for instance, the underlying protocol is what makes Imbue.network Imbue.network. It's ultimately a platform for anyone to create their own DAOs, for lack of a better term, but really organizations that have a common goal and common stake in some project, and they want to see that project successful. So that becomes sort of like a microcosm of governance on top of the underlying governance. Yeah. So how does the underlying governance look like? Is that a bunch of people that are maybe veteran project owners in the ecosystem or sort of on top of the platform? Or
So what we want to do in the short term is, one, define the council members, right? So it's going to be 4 core team members and 3 from the community. And the next step would be to build something like Polka Assembly, right? Or to allow people to submit proposals and allocate their voting power when it comes to what do you want the network to be built out on. So a lot of the questions you're like, how will the governance look? How will we connect all these different parts of the governance elements together with it? Will be through this UI and these tools. And we're not going to just build out a Discord server and say, look, let's just vote. It has to be on-chain. We have to have on-chain governance. I think that's a rule that we are saying within our team. Like, everything needs to be, and that's why we're pushing to be as transparent as possible. I think we're setting the standard when it comes to like transparency and accountability. We're building off a public board, which I wanted to show with you guys here. Like in the Web2 world, you work in an agile manner. If anyone who worked in IT, this will be familiar to them. You have sprints. Sprints are 2-week windows where you're going to do some work. And what we're doing at Imbue is, not only can you see who the devs are, but you can see what they're working on and how long they want to work on it. This transparency is going to be essential for the governance modules that we end up building, because it also needs to be on-chain and transparent. And we need to ensure that people have enough time to vote on an idea. And there is absolutely a problem with voter turnout that we are yet to solve, but I think it's due to the fact that people are just not aware of when referendums are made, for example. So we need to figure out a way of notifying people, making it more visible in the community, right?
Yeah, DAO tooling is something that's definitely lacking, I think, pretty much in all of this space. But not just tooling that devs understand, but something that like
anyone can
our
understand.
parents and their parents could ultimately maybe understand when they're flicking away at their computers and looking at things to get involved with. So it really is a UI problem. Before we get into UI and UX stuff, because I think this is really interesting. And by the way, Sam, can you post this link too? I'll put it into the
of course.
Markdown file, for this
really
session.
easy to remember. It's Imbue board, and it's
okay, cool.
Tiny URL /Imbue board. That will take you to the
thanks, Sam. So the one point that I had when we were discussing what to go over, and we'll just briefly go over, because we talked a lot about the palette already. If you don't mind going back to the tab on the palette.
Yeah, of course.
What were some more like technical things that you were thinking as you were building this out with regards to the storage that you're using, and sort of anything else like for protections that you put in place?
Yeah.
Maybe let's just spend a couple minutes on that, not more, and then go into UI UX stuff.
So first of all, when it comes to protections, we had to make sure we define what can be stored on chain versus what can be stored off chain, right? Mm-hmm. So over here we have things like the length of the things that you can put in, the name, the milestones. What we needed to define as a team is what are the things that need to be stored on chain, like the project name, for example, the milestones, how much each milestone's worth, how much funding you require. These are things that need to be on chain versus things like like an FAQ or a way for team to give updates. Storage is very, very expensive on blockchain, so we wanted to alleviate that need as much as possible. So our UI will be like a CRM where people come in and say, look, by the way, I have this update to the team. I want to build out the FAQ. I have a new team member. That information doesn't necessarily have to go onto the chain, but it can live off chain, right? So that's one of the things that we have to think about. Another is, how do we stop people from voting when, they have no say, right? So this is another protection we put in place that, you have to have contributed. If you don't have a contribution, then you basically you have no actually not here, not the contribution part, sorry. It's the voting, right? So anyone can contribute. We're not limiting the contribution. There are some protections in the UI, being the people who create projects can't contribute to them. But when it comes to the voting, so the voting on the milestone is, is it open? Is there like a voting round being open? And if so, here,
how many contributors can vote, right?
Otherwise, you shouldn't vote, and you shouldn't vote twice, right? And when someone says no, and the project says, okay, I've submitted my milestone and it was voted down, right? I'm able to submit again, and it clears out the slate. It allows me everyone to vote again on a new round. So there are protections in place to say, this milestone is has been updated or not, and then we say vote complete. So there are a few things that we can, and then obviously in the withdrawal we had a lot of things. We had to make sure you're not able to withdraw everything. We need to withdraw in stages, and you need to ensure that you're only withdrawing what was approved. And even after you withdraw, let's say milestone 2 and milestone 3, you're only able to withdraw what's left, and it takes into account what was already taken out of the full funds.
Cool.
So these are little things that we had to really think about protecting. And I'm that's not everything. We still have a lot to think about, but we're talking about MVP, the protections in place.
Yeah, no, and the reason I ask is because I hope it kind of shows people or inspires folks that are building their pallets, like what the process is, and then hearing how you kind of gone over it. So why don't we get into the UI stuff?
Yeah,
so now,
absolutely.
like as a segue, it's really interesting to hear you say, like, when you're building out the runtime logic, you're also thinking about the user experience, obviously. Yeah. So for instance, like you're some dispatchable that does something, then needs to maybe alert that this thing happened or an event happened and things like that. So I mean, with all things considered, this is just an MVP. So you probably didn't do everything. So maybe why don't we just jump into the UI and you show us the demonstration you had.
Yep. So the UI, I think all of you can go to the UI. It's dev.imbue.network. We actually haven't launched this to the public yet. This is the first time everyone gets to see it. But I think we're fairly confident it works. So
this was all built using Polkadot.js API. Is that correct?
Well, the Polkadot.js is the interaction with the blockchain. So
and then is it a React app or?
No, not yet. No, it's not a React app yet. It will be once you submit updates. Remember, we want to be able for voters to say, look, this thing happened. I voted no. Why? We want that feedback loop, right? So we need to so that's where the React part comes in. And when you come into your section to update people on something or change your section, then all the tendering. There's so many features we want to build. Imbue is essentially a DAO of DAOs, right? Because every project that asks for funding is a DAO, right? I need to create my community. I'm getting X amount of money behind it, and these are people who believe in me and will continue monitoring my progress and give me ideas and it's backful. So that's where React comes in, right? So do you want to create the project or should I?
I think you should, and it's just because I'll have a hard time then going from one screen to the next.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let me just get the information out. Hang on. So, what's the easiest way of doing this?
Or you know what? I could if you.
No, that's fine. I've got it here.
Okay, cool.
But you can go ahead and actually do it with me, right? Because then you can see it. So what I wanted to do was
anyone really can, right?
Anyone.
So I'm also gonna post. So Sam's got this chain running.
Yeah.
So if you go to this link, it's
you can send some funds from the Alice account to your account. But
use the Alice account and send some funds to yours, and then you should be able to interact with it just as Sam is doing right now.
Yeah. So the one thing I will tell you is if you want to use the UI, you'll have to have the extension, the Polkadot.js extension.
Right.
So I'm going to create a project, right? Project A, and then I'm going to say the website is Project A. So this is basically a form that people will fill in, right? So this is the category. And then I'm going to say, this is Project A. It's an awesome project.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give me one Imbue, you'll get X. And X here is a return of investment. And again, we picked Polkadot because we can now fund in any currency, right? Any Polkadot native currency, right? And through bridges, any currencies from other chains. So over here, we've got Polkadot.js. He has all these accounts, but I'm submitting it from the Sam account. I want to hire the team, and I want 30% for that. I want to build the website, and I want 30% for that. And I want to launch the product, and I want 40% for that. Okay? So I save that. This is kind of like the preview page, right? So I'm going to finalize that project on chain, sign that transaction. And then what's happening here is it's getting saved on chain. And if I go to Polkadot.js Explorer, hopefully, if I have, I never checked if I have a balance. I hope I do. Oh, there you go. See, it's created it. You go back to that page, you'll see that proposal created. So now the project's on chain. I can go through the chain state to show you where it is. If we go into, sorry, I've got a bit of a cough today. Perfect day to get a cough. So this is all.
Yeah. So by the way, you can, anyone watching can go on that link I posted. I'll post it in the GitHub repo too, and you can see the event just happened, right? So so you can follow along this on chain.
So you see, this particular project has no contributions. I didn't withdraw any fund. The block number and it has not been approved for funding yet. But you see, I asked for 100 Imbue, but it's 10 to 12, obviously, because of the accuracy of U128, I think. Right. So I can go now to my projects, right? And I can see that project's been created. Now you see the ID is 4, but the ID on the chain is actually 0. So that's one of the issues that we had. How do you see? That's the chain's empty. There's only one project there, but my UI has multiple projects on it because they're different databases. One's off chain and one's on chain. So we had to figure out how to do the link, and the link was actually when you create a project, you'll be we get the ID basically from the event that is raised. This event, it gives us the ID, and that's what we store on the UI or the database for the UI. So now we open up a funding round, right? This is going to be done by the admin account, and it defines the concept of time on a blockchain is blocks. So what we're going to do is schedule round, and then we define, let's say, we're going to say 403 with 409. Oh, 409, right? And then submit that. Hopefully that opens up a funding round.
In 3 blocks, it'll start.
In 3 blocks. And what I want, oh, there you go. But it hasn't, the event was raised, like something happened, but technically I can't contribute until block number 403. So while that's running, I wanted to switch back to a different hat. And now I'm Claire, right? I'm going to refresh this page. I'm going to see that project I created, right? And technically at block 403, I'll be able to contribute. So if you go back to the Explorer, it's 403, which is why I see the contribution being open, right? So I'm going to contribute the full amount as Claire. I'm going to sign that transaction. And then hopefully, because the funding's open, this will save that funding to the contribution to the blockchain. We go back to the Explorer. You'll see that the contribution's been created, and that should have raised a message saying contribution succeeded. So now that, they might be waiting for the event. So I'll show you what actually happens here is we look through the events. Oh, it's because we changed the event name and we didn't update the UI. It's okay. What I wanted to show you here is how the UI actually finds out when the event is finished, right? So we go to the bed, and then again, this is on master. You go to my projects, DApp, proposals, details, index, right? And here we look. Oh, I can't. Do I have to contribute? Oh. Contribute. There you go. So the gray button was gray because it was waiting for this event. Contribution succeeded, right? And you can see it's spelled slightly differently here, but we haven't actually deployed this particular the change. It's contribute succeeded, and over here it's contribute succeeded. But this version of the UI hasn't been deployed to dev testnet, but it will be. That's fine. So now the contribution's been saved. We go back to the block. The round's finished, right? And it received all the contributions. We check the chain state again. You'll see that I have one contribution from the Claire account, but it's still not approved. And that's when the council comes back, approves this particular project. We go to the Explorer. Again, everything's on chain. You can see everything happening. You'll be able to see the approval, hopefully, project approved. So now,
so that's just pseudo for now, but really the concept is that's a governance entity. That's
exactly.
Origin. Yeah.
Exactly. So if I refresh this page, this is me as Sam, right? The initiator. If I refresh this page, we'll automatically know that I can submit a milestone now. So let's say I hired my team. Hey, let's say I hired you, Sasha, and we're happy. We promised. This is what we promised to the community. So we're gonna submit that. By submitting by submitting our milestone, it automatically opens up a voting round, and it tells people that the first milestone was submitted, right? The voting round's created. So if I switch back to my Claire hat as the contributor, refresh that, you'll see that it's not a contribution page anymore. We know it's there's a milestone to be voted on. So let's say, I'm happy with the milestone 1 of hiring the team. So again, sign that transaction. That gets saved onto the blockchain, and vote gets registered. Go to the Explorer, you'll see the same thing, vote complete. That way, I now can either wait for the council to approve, because everyone who can vote has voted, right? Or I can, and this is something we're still yet to build the UI for, but basically I can say, okay, I can finalize now because everyone's voted, right? So close the voting round early. So
okay, so to go over that process, we initiated sort of a window in which people can contribute in.
Yes.
So that is really just a mechanism for say so the Alice account or the Sam account. Sam was trying to raise funds for this project.
Yeah.
And in this case, Charlie was a contributor. So Sam is saying, I need X amount of money for this project. And if I don't raise that amount in full, then that's okay. Then I'll try again, whatever. The point being, if I raise that amount before the contribution window ends, I can go to the next step, right?
Yeah. Well, you can go to the next step by asking the council to approve the project. But in this scenario, I already got the funding, and I was waiting for people to vote on my progress.
Right, on the milestone that then you submitted.
So now
once but once you got the funds, then you can submit a milestone.
Yes.
And what's interesting though is that like there's no like enforcement on the fact that you don't need a X amount of time to go by after, right? No. You can just submit that milestone if you have it ready. Yes. It's sort of like what you're doing right now. You're already building out this MVP and you're building out this project, and you could be like, I need this funding, and maybe you're funding out of pocket, and then you submit the milestone immediately after, and then people, so long as the contributors vote that they're okay with that milestone, you actually get the funds.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. So
and we basically just went through that process. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So the voting round is created for 2 weeks or 5 minutes in the test system, but it'll be 2 weeks in production. But what happens if I've got everyone in the community supports me, or everyone in the community hates me, and they all vote? Everyone who could vote has voted. There's no point keeping that round open. So I, as someone, I can be like, look, everyone's voted, so let's close this thing early, right? And it's on chain. You can see that everyone who has voted. I can't close it early if there are missing votes. Even if there's one missing vote, I can't close it early. But in this case, I was. So milestone approved. So going back to the chain state, again, the chain is the source of truth. You look at the votes, there, milestone votes. I want all votes. And you can see it's been approved. Cool. That means I can go into the account section. This is the last thing I'm going to do, is look at the Sam account has 13.7 Imbue tokens. All right, can you see? I'll zoom in again. Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to issue the withdrawal request saying, look, my milestone's been approved, and it was 30%, so I'm expecting an additional 30 Imbue tokens. So I go back to the Explorer. Hopefully here you'll see that the project funds get withdrawn, and the UI withdraw successful. And finally, it's 42.5 because it's not exactly 43. There's 0.9 or 0.8 going to fees. But I've essentially gone through and got funded safely by convincing my contributors I've actually done the work. I haven't just submitted a white paper and promised them the world, right? This is real utility now, right? Once you convert Imbue tokens to fiat, and now I can vote with the Imbue, but I'm getting funded in fiat. I can get sorry, not fiat, stable currencies, but through bridges, maybe fiat as well, right? So that's where Polkadot's unique, the flexibility. But the point is now we've built a foundation to allow people to get funded safely, and they choose, they decide when they're happy with the progress.
Yeah, super cool. So there's a few questions that came in that are relevant to what we just went over. So the first is there an implicit concept of ROI, or is that out of scope?
So if you see here, the ROI that I've defined is X here. It could be anything. So
can you scroll up? Can you scroll up a bit? Because our videos is. Oh, there you go. That's perfect.
So here I've said gets you X. That's when I created the project. Thank you, Rutger. But the X can be anything, right? And X could be defined in also milestones. So for example, if I'm an NFT artist, I could be like, if you fund me, you're going to get X. And the first milestone would be mint the smart contracts as an example, right? Or show me where you've going to give me that ROI. Show me the proof that you're moving towards that goal of giving me the ROI. Milestone 1 could be just one step, but the last milestone could be give me the ROI, and then I'm going to vote that you've actually completed that step. So it's up to you as the initiator to define what the ROI is and how you're going to deliver it. So hypothetically, I'm a farmer. Let's say I'm a farmer. I have no clue about Web3. I don't actually care about Web3. But I need $1 million to farm. I have the land, I have the weather, I have all the resources I need to succeed except the funding. So you're like, okay, what's the ROI here? Because this is someone who has no interest in Web3 or even buying Web3 tokens. You can be, a milestone can be like defining a third party that that will handle the sale of the harvest and then buy back the Imbue token and then give it to you. So that's now we've implemented a buyback mechanism, right? So people can get the token, or it could be like getting the returns in stable currencies. This third party is now responsible for taking something that's off chain and moving it on chain, right? So that's where the real utility comes into play, where you can impact people's lives. You can bring in someone saying, look, there's a lot of funds here, and there are people who want to invest in your project, and we're taking away the barriers that exist in the Web2 world, and we're utilizing the beauty of Web3 to connect you to these people. Right. Yeah, so I hope that answered the question about ROI.
Yeah, I think it did. And the second question here actually links to sort of the last few things you said, which is storing things on chain and off chain. So what is stored off chain? What kinds of things do you anticipate are maybe going to be more off chain? Yeah. And then really then from that, like what is relevant to bring things on chain? What sort of things do you anticipate and envision?
So things that will stay on chain are things that both the team and the community believe that this thing. Right, let's refresh the page. Have I actually zoomed out 100%? Let's go to 100%. Right. So things about like a simple description of the project and how much funding they need. And the milestones, things that should be set in stone, really. Remember that you can change. You can raise amendments and say, look, I actually need more funding, or I want to move my milestones around. I think I'm going to achieve this one. These things happen in projects all the time. So you'll be able to send an amendment saying, I want to change it, and assuming, again, that goes through voting. The people who funded you get to vote. Are you happy with this change or not? Right? But there are things that are stored off chain. So we've got this is the demo of what this thing is supposed to look like in the end, right? So we've got this about section here, right? The FAQ page, right? Again, this is a template. This is not nothing behind it, right? The milestones I have, the team, and then defining pictures of the team. This is our team basically, and then the updates. So these are things that will be stored off chain. That are not necessarily, required to make this project success. But sorry, not required. It's not required to be set in stone where it's visible. But the things that are, when it comes to funding and definitions of definition of success, those are things that are defined on chain.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I hope that answered the question. It certainly did to me.
Yeah.
Where it just goes to show that like how this user experience and user interface piece is really fundamental. Because
Yes.
sure, everything on chain is the things that are undeniably important
Yeah.
to act at least as a measure of truth, or at least to some extent, what is the source of truth? It's on chain, right? In that sense. And
Yeah.
so, but on the UX side, or on the user interface side, there's a lot of stuff that's important too. Because at the end of the day, if you want, some random person that doesn't really know anything about Web3 to participate in this, they need to be using a familiar flow of how
Yeah.
to participate, right?
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
discussions and posting about the project, maybe reading where the updates are without needing to log in with a wallet or anything, and all of that. So Sam, do you think like really what's important here is to kind of centralize all of that into this app, or sort of this user interface that you're showing us?
Yeah, no, we absolutely. The thing is, to onboard people from the Web3 space, from the Web2 space, we need to give them a familiar experience. Even if the underlying tech is decentralized, that's okay as long as the UI is more comfortable for them. So they need like a My Account section. They need a way to interact with the blockchain that is slightly more intuitive than Polkadot.js, because Polkadot.js is extremely powerful. It's not the most user-friendly for someone who's brand new, even someone who's like tech savvy. They might come here and say, look, I don't know where to start, right? So we need to give a simpler user experience to onboard people, as long as we make it clear what is on chain and what is things that are off chain. So there's a clear separation of metadata versus core data. But yeah, that's what I mean. And the beauty of everything we've done is we've done it without funding. We did receive a grant from the Web3 Foundation, but we only received our first payment really in January, after most of this work has been done. And we did it this way to say that you can absolutely build something first, build a product first, build utility first, then go out and do rounds of funding rounds and private investors, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's really cool. Sort of the last point I wanted to cover as part of the seminar is, open-ended questions and room for improvements and things that you really want to work on next. Is there? But we just kind of talked a lot already on a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Is there stuff that you want to add on sort of your next steps right now? Obviously, this is an MVP. This is the core of it all. This is setting the foundations for the vision to basically take form. So yeah, what's next for you right now? Anything you want to share before we end
so
here?
Everything next is really here. We're going to start adding things into the hypothesis. This is our what we're going to work on. A lot of the things that were directly next was trying to build the MVP to get for funding, and which we are. We're going to open up a funding round. The core two things we're going to be working on next is, one, to add stable currencies, because you don't necessarily want to get funded in Imbue tokens, and two, the tendering, giving people a section where they can submit briefs. They can submit an idea they want people to build, and they have the funding to pay for it, but they just want it built safely where their funds are safe. Those are the main two things that we're going to operate, and I think those are the two things that we're going to then launch onto Kusama with.
Super cool. Well, I'm definitely excited and keeping track on your progress.
Thank you.
I think, like everyone else watching, we can do that by looking at checking on this link that you have up right now, which is really cool. Which is like, what's the expression? Put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
And dude, like, I would love to have you back on seminar, 6 to 9 months from now to see wherever, like, your progress. And I'm sure a lot of people here would love that too.
I would love that
too.
So
with that being said, like, is there any like last things you want to leave, like last words you want to leave with the community here watching?
Yeah, I mean,
developers, maybe doing the same types of projects. Maybe they're developers like not at all doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely. I think what I want to say is we're so new onto Web3. There's so much to learn, so much to do, and there are a lot of opportunities. I would say, join us on Telegram, help us. We're also on Discord if you're there. Help us build out the platform that has real utility and gives you opportunities to build out something you're really interested in. Right? We've got so many projects in the space that want to get funded, right? And they might want devs They might want devs for hire. They might want people to join their team. So this is absolutely a place where you make this abstract idea that you have in your head a reality. Because I find that the only time something becomes real is when you have people supporting you. It doesn't necessarily have to be supporting you financially or supporting you with work, but just genuinely believe in you. If they're a core group of people that believe in the same concept, it will happen. And Imbue allows people to get that group together. So yeah, join us and absolutely hold us accountable. Hold every single project in the space accountable for their promises.
Definitely. Is there any last questions from the audience that maybe you guys want to ask something before we sign off here? While I wait for questions to come in, if there are any, Sam is also the person who created a Element channel. It's also got a bridge to Discord, where a bunch of Substrate developers working on Substrate-based things gather and can ask questions and exchange information. So let's post a link to that. And I think there's already a bunch of links for people that are interested maybe in talking to you about what you're building. You know, Sam is very much out there, and he's more than happy to answer your questions. So make use of these resources. The last thing I will add is currently we are in a phase of getting more and more engagement for our Stack Exchange page. I'm sure, Sam, you're aware of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need your help. We would love to see as much engagement as possible on our Stack Exchange page, because if we have a Stack Exchange page, I think as a community, we will benefit so much more of the exchange of knowledge there, and one-on-one questions that get asked all the time.
Join them. Honestly, I mean, the Riot, Element, and Telegram. It's a great place to learn from people.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, thank you so much, Sam. I really look forward to I look forward to checking this out, and we'll be in touch.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely day.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.